Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Thornton Bharat and my co-speakers, I, Krishan Arora, Partner Tax Planning and Optimization and India Investment Advisory Leader, I'm truly delighted to welcome you all to this important webinar on Decoding 56 GST Council meeting recommendations. The 56th Council meeting is widely being viewed as a defining moment in India's GST journey. This was not just another discussion on rates or policy, but a landmark meeting that sets the tone for what is being described as GST 2.0, a phase in which tax system is expected to mature into a simpler, fairer, and more predictable framework. Today, our conversation is not just about what has been announced, but also about what it means for businesses, for consumers, for India's growth story, and last but not the least, what remains as unfinished or unaddressed agenda for times to come. Let me first set the broader context. Globally, economies are navigating a delicate balance with inflation in advanced markets, supply chain developments that are reshaping trade flows. Amidst this volatility, India continues to stand out, and there are disruptions, tariff-related developments that are reshaping trade flows, etc. And still, our GDP growth remains resilient with a strong 7.8% in the first quarter. GST collections in August once again crossed 1.7 lakhs crore rupees. At the policy level, the government's focus has been very clear: to revive consumption and strengthen domestic demand, which had been sluggish for some time. Measures such as RBI's rate cuts, higher income tax exemptions have already put more disposable income in the hands of households, and in the impact has been very visible. Against this backdrop, the GST Council's recent rationalization measures are not merely a rate adjustment, but a strategic step to ease household burdens, stimulate demand, or sharpen India's competitive edge in the global market space. The Council decisions clearly highlight dual intent to make essentials affordable while keeping equity intact. On one hand, the rate reductions of the likes on food items, medicines, individual life and health insurances, these are directly benefiting households. On the other side, cuts on automobiles, consumer durables such as televisions, air conditioners, etc., are expected to spur demand in the price-sensitive market. And at the same time, increased 40% slab on so-called sin and luxury goods that balances affordability with revenue prudence. At the same time, several important simplification measures were also rolled out. A new simplification measure was on the GST registration side, where the low-risk taxpayers and small e-commerce sellers aimed at reducing compliance burden. Risk-based provisional refunds to ease working capital pressures while safeguarding revenue. Amendments related to post-sale discounts by removing the need to pre-sale documentation and invoice-level linkage, resulting in simplified compliance for the players. And resolution of intermediary issues, which provides much-needed clarity and reduces potential disputes in future. Collectively, these reforms signal a clear intent to make GST more business-friendly, forward-looking, and litigation-right. For businesses, however, the real challenge does not lie in what is stated in the Council's press release, but in how these changes are implemented on the ground. Take transition issues like how should closing stock be treated as an example? How should goods lying in warehouses or with distributors be managed in such time when 22nd September is just on the cards? What will be the treatment of unutilized compensation sales balances lying in the books? Without clear transition guidance, these could become potential flashpoints during the implementation. Similarly, the rate cuts bring expectations of consumption boosts. But is the rate cut enough by itself, or do we really need those rural affordability, better financing availability, and confidence in disposable incomes to make that shift durable? These are currently posed with, and precisely what we are discussing today as an important subject. And to help us navigate these issues, I'm joined by a panel of domain and industry experts with me. I welcome Gurmeet Singh Sukhija, Indirect Tax Head, Mankind Pharma Group; Manoj Mishra, Partner and Tax Controversy Management Leader; Sachin Shinde, Partner Tax Planning and Optimization. Together, they bring a wealth of experience and practical insights across industries and policy discussions, and we will kind of navigate all of those things together. I'm welcoming all of the members. Gurmeet is still yet to join, I think, but we'll have him soon. And this panel and myself, are looking forward to some insightful discussions as we decode some of the finer aspects before the print. Before I hand it over to my colleague Sachin for a presentation, I would encourage all guests and participants to actively engage with us by submitting your questions in the Q&A box. It is live. Our team will try to address them real time during or in the course or by the end of the session. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We look forward to a conversation that is not only technical, but practical, thought-provoking, and relevant to your business. With that, let me invite my colleague Sachin Shinde to take us through the key aspects of the GST Council's announcements before we open up for a deeper panel discussion. Over to you, Sachin.
Thank you, Krishan, and thank you for setting the context so very well, giving a perspective about the industry, how the growth has been, what's been the collections, and how we need to look at this rationalization in a very objective manner. I think you set the context right, and we can only move forward from here. But before I kind of move ahead, just want to take a step back. It's always great to take a step back and then jump forward. Uh, I go back when the last budget was introduced, and you had the economic survey, and the economic survey for the financial year 25-26 was very well articulated, and it was just like a story. And one of the things which I was kind of just looking at when I looked at the economic survey was there have been a lot of growth areas which have been given, especially from an India GDP growth, which grew at around 6.5, 6.4%. However, agri and services did grow, but parallelly, manufacturing sector grew at a very moderate rate, and it did not pick up at the pace which it was pre-COVID. And this was not a scenario for India alone, but this was something which was a global phenomena, including US, which grew at around 2.8%, Europe grew at around 0.9%. But in all the regions, be it India as well as global, manufacturing sector or goods sector as such, if I may say so, grew at a moderate rate and did not pick up the demand that it was pre-COVID. Services was an excellent growth story across. Similarly with agriculture. Rather, one of the statements which the economic survey did mention was, with the uncertainties that are currently persisting and also the trade measures or the protective trade measures which have been given, there was a likelihood that the global economy could see a degrowth in that sense. So on that note, what has been coming out as an action plan is nothing short of our defense plan for a probability that there could be a degrowth in the global economy. And I think that's exactly what what I look at this measure. I wouldn't just call it a rate rationalization measure, but I think a much more planned action if there is anything which is coming up ahead, any sort of uncertainties. So therefore, it's a measure which we should really look up to. And again, the way we look at when our borders were impacted and when our borders were crossed, we had an Operation Sindoor, which kind of was actioned in a similar manner. If our borders on the economy lines are going to be touched upon, we are going to increase and create our defenses. This is an invisible defense that we are able to create, our economic policy. And I think this is a much more larger policy change that has been done. So with that, I think I will go to the changes which are expected to come in. If I could just go to the previous slide, please. The previous slide. The one before? Right. So what we've done is we've categorized all these changes into sectors and are giving a perspective on each of these sectors. But if you look at why these sectors, these are the foundation of the economy: the FMCG sector, the automobiles, consumer durables, construction. These are the foundation of our economy. Now, if I look at the rate changes that are expected to happen, the rate rationalization has done primarily between 5% and 18%. And this is exactly what has been the story right from the conceptualization of GST, where the rates were expected to be only 2 slab rates. And I think we are aligned to that extent. So this coming up with an opportunity for us to increase the consumption is what we're kind of looking at. So if I look at the FMCG sector, you've seen a rate rationalization from 18, 12, and 5 to 5 and nil. And I think this is exactly what is needed for us to boost our demand. If for any corporate, when they look at the base of the pyramid story, a major consumption opportunity lies there, where the volumes are high and the margins are low. But if you are able to touch the base of the pyramid, and I think which is what we are kind of trying to do, we'll be able to touch larger and grow much more stably and in a faster manner. With almost 900 odd million people in the base of the pyramid, with almost 114,000, 114 lakh households in the base of the pyramid, we cannot not address this. This is actually our defense. So therefore, enabling those defenses and activating those defenses is something which is a very welcome move. So this is going to help us by the rate reduction is going to help us in these sectors to overcome any sort of challenges which could be a threat to the economy. The automobile sector, one of the barometer of the Indian economy. If the automobile sector is doing well, we will typically say that yes, the market or the economy is growing. There's a lot of changes which have been happened in the automobile sector. With the compensation cess being going out, you'll see a lot of rate rationalization from a 29 on an average 31% to 18%. We've seen the entire compensation cess getting subsumed. The natural rate of around 48 to 50% for large and luxury vehicles, that has been reduced to 40%. And more importantly, the parts and the smaller vehicles, the trucks, the ambulances, the auto spare parts, that has been reduced from 28 to 18%. This gives a big relief for the automobile industry and also to the auto component manufacturers, where there were a lot of classification related disputes and matters. And I think that's a welcome move from the automobile industry, helps us to standardize and help us to grow in that manner. Can we move ahead, please? The consumer durables industry, again, moving from 28% to 18%. The lower reductions are going to enable, as I said, the agri sector has seen a lot of has seen that growth and has been consistently growing. The surplus that is expected to be in the agri industry is going to go primarily in the FMCG and consumer durable industry. So therefore, this only again enables boosting consumption in those sectors. The healthcare pharma, again, a foundation of the Indian economy. We've seen our healthcare and pharmaceutical industry standing strong during the times of COVID, needed that boost furthermore. And therefore, there has been a rate reductions in some of the products around medical devices, some life-saving drugs, some rare disease drugs. All those rates have been changed and reduced to that extent, again, boosting the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry. How can we not talk about the agricultural and the rural economy? There have been a substantial amount of rate changes from 18% to 12 to 5%, and from 12% to 5% in agricultural machinery, tractors, irrigation, sprinklers, and other products. Again, similar story as the base of the pyramid. If the base of the pyramid and the agriculture sector is taken care of, they are going to be saving, and they are going to be again pumping that through increase in consumptions. So that's again a welcome move. Construction industry, a backbone of the industry, again creates substantial amount of employment and caters to the base of the pyramid. Again, changes in the rate of cement will see a change in the rates. Rate of housing sector as well, and again boosting demand. So we can move to the next slide, please. The services sector, as I said, though in a 6.5% growth rate, which we saw last year for the entire in the GDP, services grew at almost 7.5%. And there were certain things which were required in the services sector as well, but not many tweaks in the services sector, except those which were directly touching the consumers or touching again the base of the pyramid. Insurance was one very critical element to that extent, where the life insurances, the rate of tax on those products have reduced from 18% to 0%, again supporting and increasing consumption in those sectors. And the renewable energy, self-reliance was very, very critical for us when we're looking at moving and giving the right direction to the economy. So changes in the renewable energy sector also is a welcome move, helping to reduce project costs. So this is a broad level rate rationalization, which has effectively happened across sectors. But if you see, there are very core foundational sectors which have been touched upon. And those sectors, there has been a substantial boost and a boom which has been given. Can we move to the next slide? Again, not only rate changes, but also simplification measures which have been brought in. The long-awaited GST tribunal, appellate tribunal, has been operational, will be operational effective 30th of September. Hearings will start off by 31st of December. And thereafter, the backlog appeals which have been pending can be filed for before 30th of June 2026. So therefore, the probability is if there are any issues around classification and other matters with certain clarifications coming in, they may want to kind of look at the number of appeals that may get filed in the GSTAT. But I think that's a welcome move that was much awaited and wanted, and the industry was looking forward for it. Another element was the simplification measure that they carried out was the risk-based provisional refunds that they have thought of. Though they have extended this risk-based provisional refund for inverted duty structure refunds as well. The export refunds, the provisional refund provisions were already in place. However, it was primarily restricted, or it was discretionary for the officer whether to give those provisional refunds or not. In most of the cases that we saw, 90% of the cases, the provisional refunds were not granted, as a result of which a substantial amount of working capital was getting blocked. In pockets, we saw those provisional refund provisions being activated and officers giving those refunds. However, I think this is a measure which enables that whenever, be it an ISD or be it an export refund, this is going to be a system-based process which is going to be followed, that when you apply for a refund, naturally, can you just keep that slide, please? Yes. The risk-based provisional refunds are something which enable through a system that if a dealer is identified as a risk-based dealer, then his refunds only will not be processed within 7 days. Else, if it's a normal dealer where his records are all fine, in that situation, the refunds will be processed within 7 days. And I think this is a big welcome move, which eliminates all discretionary situations, which stops refunds to be processed. And I think this is one of the biggest simplification measures that I could say. Another measure that was brought in was omission of the intermediary services. The place of supply has been identified as the location of the intermediary. A lot of GCCs, a lot of IT companies were struggling with these provisions, their refunds getting stuck. And therefore, this provision now eliminates any questions, any litigations around intermediary by the ITITS sector. Now, with the place of supply being the location of the intermediary, questions of whether it qualifies as an intermediary and correspondingly whether an export is something which has been eliminated. So therefore, another simplification and a welcome move. From a post-sale discount perspective, there were a lot of challenges and clarifications which were effectively needed. So to that extent, now earlier there was a requirement to have an agreement before you pass on any discount. With that expectation, there has to be an agreement, and there has to be a linkage of those agreements and these invoice and the credit notes to the particular invoice. those all expectations of linkages and having an agreement have been eliminated. Again, a very welcome move, especially to the pharma, to the FMCG, and to the consumer durables industry, where there are substantial amount of credit notes which gets passed on. Parallelly, clarifications are expected to come our way about financial credit notes or commercial credit notes, and correspondingly, if there are any credit notes which are given typically in the dealer network, in a distributor network, on certain services which will be provided by the dealer to the OE or to the brand owners. So I think that's again a welcome move for easing or clarifying certain unwarranted questions from the authorities on transactions which are routine and which are business as general. Simplification of GST registrations, that's something which organizations were struggling with, especially MNC organizations, where they were taking registrations in India. The time lag for taking those registrations were extremely high. There was a lot of discretion which was given to the officers of denying GST registrations as well. So to that extent, those have been eased out, and it is expected that the registrations now will be done only in 3 days. So I think this is something which is a welcome move, or the simplification measures that have been carried out. Having said this, does it mean that the simplification has ended, or is this the only simplification that was needed? Can we move to the next slide, please? The answer to that is no. There is a lot of things which are needed, and there are a lot of simplifications which are still needed. The simplifications need to be right from the time when the rates have changed. There are enough number of transitional issues, and the industry has a very limited amount of time while addressing those transitions. Elements around pricing, price considerations, your delay in pricing, how to change the prices, your changes in the MRPs. Just a few hours back, we saw a circular coming in from the legal metrology about changing in prices. All those things are going to be transitional challenges that the industry needs to really be geared up to. There could be a probability that if there are, let's say, a product which was supposed to be was taxable and credit was available, is now got exempted. Now the question is, what happens to those transitional credits, whether those credits which the industry has revealed, till when they will be allowed to be passed on, whether that will be available as a refund or not. All those questions are still hovering in the minds of the industry, and you still need to come up with a price when on 22nd of September you need to come up with a price. What cost I need to build in? How do I build in those costs? And how do I give a price and still meet the requirements of the government to say that the prices should reduce? So I think pricing considerations need to be addressed appropriately. Needless to say, the inventory and the supply chain challenges, so stocks lying with at the distributors, at the dealers, the stock lying with the retailers, manufacturing the labels which are currently the old packing material which is available. All those things need a different thought process. Organizations need to be much more agile when they are actually looking at those transitional changes. It can't be sitting, with systems, with processes which are not agile. As I said, this is just the beginning. It's not the end, and it's going to be more and more that these changes will happen, and the availability of time is going to be much more shorter. So planning inventory and supply chain transitions is going to be something which to look up to. System and process readiness is something which we'll have to kind of look at. How our POS are taken care of? What are the challenges that they face? The systems needs to be updated. All those things will effectively have to be considered. Regulatory and reputational risks, there is going to be an incremental scrutiny. One of the conversations that I had was, when you're going to look at a deficit in the revenue, I wouldn't call a shortfall or a reduction in my revenue, but that deficit needs to be bridged. Will it be bridged in the short term? How will things turn out to be in Jan, Feb, March, when the year ends close, is something to look up to. Authorities may tend to get much more aggressive. Scrutinies may be much more stronger. So therefore, one needs to really prepare ourselves and make sure that those we are prepared with our compliances in that sense. Parallelly, when we're looking at communicating, authorities have constantly said, though Honorable Finance Minister mentioned during the post council meeting that we are not tending to introduce anti-profiteering provisions in that sense. But every communication thereafter, every article that we could refer to, there have been communications to state that they are watching, they're keeping a close tab on what's happening. They're going to be tracking those things. And I think that's one thing to look up to, though they have been given that flexibility. When onus and responsibility is given onto the industry, it's the responsibility of the industry thereafter to prove that, okay, the benefits that it has accrued has been actually and rightly passed on to the customers. So communication and trust dependencies across the entire supply chain will be very critical. Your challenges around liquidity and capital is something which we need to also look at, how your working capital needs to be managed. With the rate reductions, the probability of inverted duty structure refunds increasing, amounts getting blocked. Though, as I said, that the provisions for provisional refunds were there for exports, but never executed in that sense. We would want to see how those refunds get processed, and as a result of which compensations or working capitals could be looked at. Parallelly, one very critical element is the budgetary support schemes and the state's incentives. A lot of organizations would have taken state incentives or claimed budgetary support schemes from the central and the state governments. To that extent, what is the impact of that? Because all of them were dependent on the rate of tax. And I think that is something one needs to really plan the cost of that. So for example, how this is linked to my pricing. If I know that I'm not going to be able to recover the incentives that I had claimed, and I passed on that, assuming that the prices of the products are factoring those incentives, do I need to kind of relook at that pricing again, considering these incentives or schemes getting impacted? Long-term contractual alignments needs to be revisited. For example, especially in the infrastructure, the real estate sector, or any plant being set up, you would have given a contract with a fixed price contract. The prices for cement and other products have gone down. How will those get impacted? Your fixed price contracts, your inclusive rate contracts, long-term tenders, those are going to get changed. So these transitional challenges needs to be understood and addressed well. The good part is today we got to know that the CBIC is meeting all industries across all sectors. It's important that you are able to articulate your challenges and present it so that they are able to clarify those and take care of some of those things. You could go to the next slide, please. Having said this, despite there have been a lot of clarifications which have been given, there are certain areas which is still not been addressed. What are those? Liquidation of compensation cess. There is no clarity on what happens to that compensation cess, which especially the automotive sector has seen. It's talked about anywhere upwards of 2,000 crores of compensation cess could get impacted. Parallelly, what happens where where the rate has been reduced to 5% with no ITC? Typically in the hospitality industry, you look at a hotel now, if it's charging a rate below 7,500 rupees, and it's a new hotel, it would have actually taken credit of all the capital and the input goods. They are going to lose out that credit. What's happening to those products? Your refund for ITC accumulation due to rate reductions. What's going to happen for that? Your anti-profiteering, though we are saying that there is no anti-profiteering, but the messaging through the public domain is is talking all about responsibilities to pass on. Your insufficient time for logistics management, your state incentives recalibration. There's a lot of unaddressed issues in that sense, which is still to be kind of catered to and to be addressed. And it's only right for the industry to represent, if they are facing these issues, to the government to state that this needs to be addressed. You could go to the next slide, please. Last but not the least, is this the end of it? The answer to that is no. For example, there is still unfinished business. There's still more rationalization that needs to be done. There are still certain things which need clarity. For example, when I talked about intermediary, the place of supply has been changed. However, India is a very large industry for capability centers around testing. For example, if I test any services in India, I provide any test services for my global MNC, for my global group in India, and I earn foreign currency, I still do not qualify as an export because the place of supply for performance-based services is still India. Clinical trials done in India, revenue earned in foreign currency, but still do not qualify as exports. Some of those elements needs to be still looked at. E-way bill related matters. We still have situations where trucks are halted at some places, and for basic errors, those needs to be still resolved. Your comprehensive ITC reform. We need a comprehensive reform in the ITC structures, the restrictions of credits. Indirect tax and a GST is a consumption-based tax, and therefore taxes needs to be loaded onto the final product and not to the industry or the business. Are there any hindrances in meeting that objective? Your inverted duty structure refunds are going to increase with the reduction in the rates. Are we addressing those? Have I looked at my entire supply chain, or I've looked at only a product? If a typical supply chain is to be looked at, I need to look at right from the raw material to my FG. And unless I look at the supply chain, I really have not addressed the real problems and the real structures. And I think this is just the beginning. Unfinished business is still more. But I'm going to take a pause to give you a perspective and pass it on to Krishan to take it forward. These are certain thoughts which I could share on the changes which have happened, but happy to hear from the panelists, with our esteemed panelists, their views on what are the changes. And over to you, Krishan, for that.
Thanks, Sachin. Since we are little short on time now, so I will jump into the panel straight, and I'll want to bring in, and thanks for those insights. I think a couple of very important questions raised in terms of the unfinished agenda, and we'll come back on that because some of those questions will be the ones which I'll be picking up with our panel here. So I have Gurmeet Sukhija, who's here as the India Tax Head from Mankind Group. I think nobody better but him in this panel today, and we've been talking about FMCG and pharma, and I'm sure very close to Gurmeet's mind right now. I think he's diving in and strategizing wherever those issues are kind of grappling, because pharma sector is planning and gearing up for it. And I want to hear from Gurmeet immediately on this one. Gurmeet, thank you. I know that you had to urgently step into a management meeting, but thanks for joining in. And I hope you're being driven so that you can talk and you're on your video. But as you just heard, and we all know that India is transitioning into a two-slab structure. I think what do you see as the biggest challenge for the sector, for the pharmaceutical sector? For instance, how should companies deal with closing stock valuation at old rates? How will the new rates get applied, especially when significant inventory has been lying with stockists and distributors?
Thanks, Krishan, and thanks, Sachin, for an insightful session. Before I begin, just a couple of lines. Whatever I say is my personal views, as any of the associated entities. Just a disclaimer. And I want to begin with that. With these reforms, the government has truly shown the conviction, to deliver on its promise and visions. And at the heart of these reforms, what lies is the decision to have a two-structure rate. Right? If any one of you, would have asked me or anyone that just 6-8 months back, have you ever wondered that India can go to a two-rate structure? It seems impossible, but now they have done so. The message from the policymakers are very clear that the changes are not only to lower down the prices, but to empower the business, to industry, and the impact will be felt on each and everyone's wallet. Now, coming back to your question, Krishan, this is the most vexed issue, apart amongst others, that the inventory which is lying with the distributor. So we are doing every bit of it, though the industry is awaiting the formal notification, which actually will tell you what are the rate changes, or maybe at the 8-digit HSN code. However, during one of these sessions, the government has assured the industry that 99.9% of the HSN rates will remain the same, and the tax rates will remain the same as been prescribed in the press release. So taking a cue from that, obviously, when the GST change will be the change. So the companies, the industry is working on that. We are engaging with the stockists, with the retailers, to provide them all the support, be it about the technology, the changes in their systems, or any logistics, any documented changes, etc. But yes, this is a tedious task, understanding what all queries there are a lot of what happened to my input tax credit, how the rate is going to be changed, whether I'm allowed to use the ITC, what all documentation is going to be changed, is there change in the HSN code or not? So all these queries are being handled by the industry, and with all forces, we are working down the line with the supply chain.
And then you think that 22nd September, comes 22nd, if notification are issued, everything is on time, you guys are ready.
I remember talking to one of the government officials. They said that think about the excise era where the budget was announced at 4 p.m. and you were supposed to change the GST rate at 10.
Right.
Consider yourself lucky that you have got 19 days. But yes, these things, the timeline, I'm not saying that it is sufficient or it is enough, but it is a breather. And I'm sure that with the infrastructure that the company has, and exactly if I make a point here, the agility of the technology system, or how much agile is your digital, how much agile the company is digitally, will pave the way for a smooth implementation of these reforms. You have to have your IT implementation top notch, because there are many things which are going to be change your batches, the batches which is lying in the inventory in the SAP. How will you change the MRP of the same, how to convert it, and then dealing the same down the line with the distributors, retailers, and also at the same time with the vendors. This requires efforts, obviously, but yes, we are working and we are confident that this will be done before 22nd.
That's great to know, and I hope that most of the industry players are talking the same language, because that is the intent of this change. It's very vast, but at the same time, it's in the good intent of what you just mentioned, and will benefit every sector of the economy at large. Manoj, I'll bring you in here with what you heard from Gurmeet. I think just building on that, what is your perspective on reconciling closing stack valuations, and how does adjustments of MRP could be managed effectively, because Gurmeet gave a very practical aspect to it. They're working on it. But what do you think, what you've heard and what we've been talking to various associations, what is that thought in terms of what people should be looking at for valuation and MRP?
Krishan, I somewhat agree with Gurmeet, but the major challenge would be the stocks being held by the retailers and the wholesalers. So you can control the stocks which, as a manufacturer, you have, but the stocks available at retailers would be very difficult to take care of, because like you have already sold those goods to the retailer, so you do not have any control over that. So going there physically, taking care of the stock, and as Gurmeet and Sachin mentioned, then we have circular from the legal metrology changing MRP. I think it is definitely going to be a tedious task, and considering that we have only a few days, and from 22nd we have to apply that. So I agree with Gurmeet that though it is a tedious task, but hope that with the kind of experience they have and the kind of networking, and we are living in the digital era, perhaps we will be able to do that. But yes, like taking care of the stocks available at retailers, definitely a very big task.
And I think clearly one of the ways will be that, while there'll be a change in terms of the price wherever the rate has gone down, effectively the, retailers, distributors, all of them will be very clear in terms of protecting their margins. So they will be falling back on the original manufacturers, or, the pharmaceutical companies, the owners, to actually get that right. And I'm sure the support will be provided by them, is what I'm sure is what we heard also from Gurmeet in terms of the way they are looking at it as a positive change. So Gurmeet, we talked about rate rationalization. I think in pharma and many other sectors, there could be potentially certain inverted duty structures which will probably continue, especially because the input tax on the APIs, key inputs, are higher than the output GST, which has gone down to, say, 5% on, say, formulations. So what practical strategies should companies adopt which are managing such situations of inverted duty in case there is ITC mismatches, or mitigating that compliance risk or litigation risk?
Also, Krishan, you have touched upon another plagued issue, and it was the demand of pharma industry even before the rate rationalization, that we are reeling down under the inverted duty structure because of API, which is the raw material for the finished goods. is at 18 and our final product is at 12. Now that 12 has become 5. Another problem is that now you see the inverted duty structure, you do not include the input services and the capital goods. This could lead a serious, credit accumulation. And as of today, there is no practical solution to it except to relying on the the assurance from the government that 90% of the, as Sachin explained during the session, that 90% of the refund you will get in 7 days. But the main moot question is that what will you do when you spend on the capex and the input services? We all know that ISD has been made mandatory. Now whatever services you take, that is at 18% only. So this will create further, while distributing the ISD credit, this will create further trouble at all the depots and the branches. And most importantly, as we have read in the FAQs, that the same product, if the product which is already lying at 12, because in every company, be it about FMCG or pharma or auto, there is an inventory which is at 30 or 60-day level. What will you do at the inventory which is already lying at the depot and the branches if you are not able to file the inverted duty structure refund? It is well understood that it might take from 8 to 14 months to clear that inventory, even when you apply the margin, but that issue remains the same. And I understand that we are making a lot of representations through various associations, through GT as well, to the government, that let's think about it. Please allow is for the distributor that a credit note can be issued, a GST credit note can be issued from the company to the distributor, or from the plant to our own depot, so that the transitional inventory can get cleared. However, I'm not sure that what sort of relaxation the government will bring in. Just it's a game of wait and watch. But one point I would, then it will be somewhere that there will be no or a very limited cash liability, going forward, because there is a huge gap between 18 to 5. If your inputs continue to remain at 18, the output is 5. Companies will find it difficult to have cash liability. So government should also look at the structure.
Right. Thanks, Gurmeet. I think you're on the way, so we can see that you're losing some level of bandwidth. If you want to just put off your screen, yeah, that's also okay, because some part of that can help you. But I think it's a very, very important point what you mentioned, and this is an issue which is something which is come up with many sectors across pharma, in consumer, in other areas as well. While government mentioned specifically for textile and fertilizers, but I think because of the rate change, especially you rightly mentioned, from 18 to 5, 12 to 5, services remaining at 18, I think poses a large issue already. And with raw materials still being taxed at a higher rate, I think has been something which will be definitely represented to the government in terms of how that can be aligned, whether we expect a further rate change to be aligned for inverted duty structure for reduction of rate for raw materials is something which government probably will have to look at again. Or in the interim, how will that mechanism of that accumulated ITC can be refunded back in terms of the transitional stock, at least for a certain period of time, is something which would be also an important area to look at and which and what for. So at this moment, I think, Manoj, from your perspective, I think we have had these issues in past that inverted duty refunds have been a challenge with for the taxpayers. So with recent measures which have been now announced that we will be able to look at refunds becoming speedy, for inverted duty also there will be a refund mechanism which will be automated. What do you think will be a meaningful relief which will be available, or you still think that there could be challenges?
So, Krishan, historically, refund has always been a litigative issue. And refund in case of inverted duty structure is not exception. So we have seen a lot of to and fro verification of records which are already available with the department, and that too, if something goes hayward, they will issue there would be litigation, and then everything is stuck for a longer significant period of time. So yes, we have seen litigation in the past and had a lot of tough time. Apart from that, as Gurmeet mentioned, that there is no refund of services as well as for capital goods, and that is affecting not just for exporter, not just for indigenous supplies, but for exporters as well. So I would say that 90% refund, promise to refund 90% on provisional basis is a good step, but we have to see the fine print, whether it is going to be, the discretion is going to be with the officer or it is going to be automatic on the basis of some system-based risk assessment. If that happens, then it is perhaps to certain extent it will provide some relief, but definitely there has to be certain provisions related to refund of services as well as for the capital goods. I'm not sure how much it will get impacted on account of WTO, but yes, for services definitely they should do something. And as far as this 90% case, it should be system-based risk assessment, and should not be left at the discretion of the officer who is granting the refund. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think rightly mentioned that these provisions are meant to kind of ease out that burden, speed up the process of liquidating the working capital which gets blocked. And if provisional refund provision was already there, but in substance and form, if they are implemented in this fashion that it's all automated, I think will be a very big relief. But at the same time, I think what is also required and what I'm hearing from Gurmeet and you is, and I also believe that is that there is a need for the government to also look at facilitating the inverted duty structure corrections by way of either refunds which are incorporated, and also for services, because that rate of 18% is here to continue. And for capital goods, depending on the WTO commitments, can that also be incorporated in to some extent, will be a very, very important factor which industry is going to be representing. And we know that there are representations which are going to that level of correction of inverted duty structure, those situations which have arisen only because of the rate change. So I know, Gurmeet, you have to kind of sign off soon. So last question to you. You already mentioned about the ERP change, and I completely agree. A structure where the technology is driving forces in terms of changes which are incorporated is a very important factor for any such change magnitude of this sort to happen. So while you talked about the changes, calibrations, I think is there with this change, what should be really prioritized to ensure compliance and that rollout which should happen for the new rates on 22nd September?
Krishan, the immediate thing is that how to map the old inventory which is available with the MRP change that you have
Right.
decided. There are other so many issues. What would be the cutover strategy? At what date you will be accepting the inventory from your vendors? At what date your distributor should accept the inventory from you at the old MRP? What if the sales return happens post the inventory rate? What rate will be applicable? How this will pan out at the GSTN portal? So, for example, I've sold the inventory at 12 and I'm taking back at 12, but 12 will not exist after 22nd of September. So, how to check those things? In pharma, there are a lot of issues of breakage and expiry. If these goods return back, how should I take them back? And similar kind of things that and all these things needs to be done within this limited span of time. And doing any change in SAP, if you ask any person, that is a Herculean task. To have change the entire batch of the MRP and to remap with the new rates, and to preserve the old rates as well, because you want to have a sales return and everything. So I think there is not one thing or two thing which I can prioritize. It is going in full force. And but having said that, the immediate priority is obviously that how to bill my first invoice on 22nd of September with the changed MRP. That is our number one priority as of date, and also to help my distributors and retailers to do the same. That is what we are focusing.
Right. I think, and this is exactly what people were doing when GST came. I still remember, our first invoice on the very first day, 1st July 2017. Will I be able to issue a GST invoice or not? I think that was the priority, and rest will follow. And I'm sure all of the other things are also equally important. But very important point which you touched upon is the ERP changes. I think similar impact is on other sectors like FMCG, consumer durables, where there are multiple SKUs. So I think all of those companies are today looking at the same thing, what you are looking at. And I'm sure in the spirit of making it happen, everybody's at full force doing that. But thank you, Gurmeet. Thanks for joining us for this time, and really, really appreciate that you could still take out time to do this on your way. So thank you for this, and we'll touch base soon again. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Krishan. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. So coming back and continuing this discussion, I'll bring back this question to Sachin, you. I think ERP changes is what you heard. What do you think? I think from a what we see as ERP implementation service providers, we've seen changes which happened, and we've done integrations at the time of GST. Which ERP areas do you think industry should focus on? While we heard Gurmeet mention about a couple of them in priority, to ensure that the system is ready and the compliance issues are avoided on the very first day?
No, I think it's a very valid question, and I go back to what Gurmeet mentioned. Agility is the name of the game. Organizations need to be much more agile, especially your IT systems. We can have the best of IT systems, but unless and until we have the data in the right manner and the right fashion, none of the IT systems are going to help. So therefore, my focus would be on data, and my focus would be on masters, if I may say so. I need to be absolutely sure of how my masters are created, for what those are created, how they are utilized, how they are linked into all the processes which I talk about. You talk about vendor master, customer master, product master, your BOQ related masters. I need to be strong on my masters. If my masters are good, capturing the right data, and are robust enough, I think a lot can be done. This is not, as I said, it's not the end. Changes are going to be much more, and it will eventually happen. And typically, the way, for example, way back in 2016, we did not get that much of time to tweak our IT systems. I was talking to one of my clients who's sitting in Germany, was asking, why did we not get time? I said, we don't learn swimming the way you learn there. We will be thrown into the waters and we will learn swimming there. So therefore, the time is now not normal going to be months, it's going to be days. And therefore, agility is the only way to kind of be absolutely. And to be agile, you have to be strong in your foundation, which is your masters, your processes. So the best of systems, but with strong masters, will work wonders for you. That's my way of looking at how things will help you while making those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think clearly government has already assumed, having given so much time for different set of industries, different set of people who had different turnovers, actually adopt IT systems and gave them time even at the time of e-invoicing. So I'm sure at this point of time, it is assumed that all of them are completely ready from a tech perspective. So this could be a challenge at a distributor or a stockist level or retail level. But I think that is what the expectation was at the time GST was issued, that the bigger player will take care of the smaller players. I think that's what will continue as we move forward. But I was reading through the Q&A as well on the side, because we are at the closer to the end of the time. But Manoj, compensation cess, I think, is a big issue, which is a common issue for certain sectors like auto. So the treatment for unutilized compensation cess balances which are lying in taxpayers' books, which there is no provision for set off. If 22nd September comes, compensation cess goes. What could be the way this will be addressed for the industry, and could it become a fresh source of litigation unless clearly transition rules are empowering or encouraging some level of set off for that in terms of the mechanism?
So, Krishan, you rightly mentioned, perhaps apart from rate changes, like dealing with the compulsion cess is something most talked about subject post this rate announcements. Yes, you are right. As of now, we do not have any transition mechanism. If we have to believe, the CBC chairman has clearly mentioned that there would be no refund mechanism for that. And the only hope is that the finance minister, in her interaction with the media, she only said that she'll look into it. So as of now, we do not have anything, but we have to understand the implications. It will completely eat up the rate reduction in terms of for automobile as well as for the rated drinks, because most of the, like if you talk about cars, So suppose rate of car was 43%. Now we are saying it is 40%. But in fact, it was removed at the rate of 28 plus 15%. And if 50% become a sunk cost, it is actually the rate would go up rather than coming down. So and the on top of it, we are going through the period where, in at least in North India, people avoid buying a good product, white goods, cars or any other white goods. So that is another issue. So it is not that they are going to liquidate their inventory before 22nd. So we'll have to deal with inventory on 22nd, which would be compensation paid and which would become a sunk cost. So definitely they'll have to have some kind of mechanism. Otherwise, entire purpose will get defeated. So, and as you rightly mentioned, there would be some litigation. We can see filing of writ petition because it was the credit was availed, and at that point of time they were eligible for that, and a car was liable for compensation cess. So they may seek refund. So yes, either they should have a proper transition mechanism, or we will see surge of litigation on that count. And and in addition to that, there would be some demand which will get impacted until unless the manufacturers absorb some of the cost of this count.
No, and we can already see that many of the, car manufacturers have already come out with schemes to offer discounts upfront right now, mentioning GST rate change. But that is actually true. Actually, looking at the compensation cess which is accumulated, it before 22nd September, I think they are trying to liquidate as much as possible. But you're right, it is very, very specifically time at which, at least in North India, purchasing may not happen. But that's what they're hoping for. But it is a very important subject, an important matter to be addressed immediately, because this will become a cost, and there are two mechanisms which have to come into place. Otherwise, customers on the other side will be waiting for a rate reduction and and they would have halted their decision to buy, products because of the rate change effective 22nd September. On the other side, this push from these OEMs to actually reduce the price right away is on account of, liquidating that compensation cess as much as possible. So I think that's an issue very specifically to all the products where compensation cess is applicable. Completely agree. I think we are just almost end of time. So, I'll ask you two questions, both of you, in the similar order. But with the fewer rate classification disputes which are expected, and that was one of the intention of the two rate structure, Manoj, will that controversy completely shift toward valuation, input tax denial, or other issues? Or what steps can businesses take to now proactively avoid disputes? I think that balancing of transition is what we have discussed. But anything else which will be relevant for them going forward to address or avoid litigation from here on?
Oh, Krishan, the first question is yes, the dispute will reduce to a great extent and shift to other quality issue like valuation and not related to classification. But yes, we are intellectual people, argumentative people. So definitely there would be some or other issues, but there would be very few in terms of numbers, and major disputes would be related to valuation and not of classification. And yes, we can see, as we have discussed during the time, there would be issues related to input tax credit, inverted duty structures, and compensation cess, because until unless they come out with a clear clarification in this regard, we'll see surge of litigation, at least temporarily, on these counts. And there could be long-term litigation in certain area like pharma, where inputs would be at 18%, output at 5%. So definitely that is the area of concern, and we may see litigation on that count.
Right. And Sachin, the global perspective to this, I think the idea was also to look at the true tailwinds for India's global competitiveness and investor confidence to come in. Will this change improve that ease of doing business truly and boost that consumption? These reforms meaningfully do you think they cushion India against those global shocks like the US tariff actions and trade headwinds?
Absolutely. I think I believe these tailwinds are going to support us in a big way. As I said, consumption is the story, we've realized the power of our consumption. Our defense forces, are someone who protecting us from our physical borders, but parallelly our economy and our consumption is going to protect us from the global headwinds in that sense. So this is going to be purely a tailwind for India. Globally, it's a precautionary measure, if I may say so. Way back in 2008, when the global recession came in and it was hit, we were caught by surprise, but we still maneuvered by making sure the rate changes happen in the right direction, and we were able to stabilize the economy. I personally believe that the current changes are absolutely taking India in the growth trajectory in the right manner, relying on the consumption of India. And I think self-reliance, not only in terms of goods, services, and everything else, but also self-reliance on our consumption. And I think that's going to be our tailwinds for the next growth
And
and
it
protect
truly,
the industry.
this brings in the global confidence of now investing into India with a better GST, more efficient, transparent structure, easier structure, simpler structure. On the other side, also getting the services truly on the recipient base will also help negating that 18% cost. Last question, we are end of time for both of you. Rapid fire. One blind spot do you think which businesses are understanding, or one wish list reform we would have liked to see in 2.0? Sachin.
I feel all exports should be without
One sentence.
No tax on exports in any sorts for services. And I would want all services, irrespective of the place of supply, to be without GST.
So zero rated.
Zero rating, 100% zero rating.
I would say that evolution of Section 17(5) of the CGST Act and allow full credit would have been something they could have done.
Perfect. I think thank you so much, gentlemen. This was really, really helpful. And I'm sure our viewers would have benefited from some of these discussions. Happy to have conversations. If you would like to reach us, our email IDs are here. You can contact us on our GT Bharat website as well, which is on your screens. And, I hope all of you are geared up for 22nd September change. And, if it happens together. And that's what government is hoping for. I'm sure industry is getting up for that. Thank you for being with us. We'll be hosting more such events in near future. So keep tuned in for more information on that, and we'll get more insights on certain specific aspects which we touched upon today into our next sessions. Thank you and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.